Our story begins 20 years after that individual left Earth and found himself in another world. That day had come, the day he would defeat the monster and save the world. The monster, however, wanted to know whether he would truly endure, referring to that individual as the true being, worthy of being called a hero, unlike his companions, who were hanging by a thread. That individual was accompanied by a saint, a mage, and a knight. The hero's name was Hyun-seok. He made it clear to the monster that it did not seem to be in very good shape. Thinking Hyun-seok insolent, the monster immediately attacked him. Hyun-seok showed no weakness and clashed head-on with the creature. The monster declared that if Hyun-seok did not submit, it would tear him to pieces and leave the land completely scarred by its teeth and claws, launching its attacks toward the hero. Hyun-seok blocked the attacks and felt that it was already time to put an end to everything. Quickly, he unleashed a skill called Paradox of Flames, causing massive destruction throughout the area. He then advanced toward the monster as the battle grew increasingly intense. At one point, Hyun-seok was struck by the monster, and his guard was not enough to hold it back. The monster proclaimed that Hyun-seok's attack was far too weak and had not even left a scratch. After realizing this, the hero prepared himself and swiftly launched another attack at the monster, to see whether this time it would be enough to crush its arrogance. Flames engulfed the monster for a moment. Soon, its crown fell, and the monster became eerily silent. It had never imagined that a human in that world could stand against it. Hyun-seok was about to tell the monster once again that he did not belong to that world, but the monster assumed the hero would continue spouting nonsense. In any case, it no longer cared, since its body would be absorbed by the earth sooner or later. Just when it believed it would be erased, the hero knew that the monster was struggling to regenerate. The black flame burning it was Hyun-seok's special ability, which he called the Paradox Flame. Unlike ordinary flames that burn using oxygen, the Paradox Flame uses abstract concepts as fuel. Reviving itself over the centuries had been the monster's hobby, but that ended at that moment, for it was now burning, its very existence reduced to fuel. The monster wondered whether its time was finally coming to an end. Even so, it believed that Hyun-seok would never be remembered as the hero who saved the world, because the people he considered his companions were actually just waiting for him to die there. Hyun-seok clarified that he already knew this, which surprised the monster, while the saint begged Hyun-seok not to believe the monster's words. However, after hearing her, Hyun-seok thought that perhaps he should start with the saint herself. She was the woman who claimed to love him and seduced him every day. Yet in truth, she despised him for being an outsider. All her attempts at seduction had been part of the plan. She was shocked to hear this from the hero. Hyun-seok knew that when the time came to purge the hero after the subjugation was complete, he would hesitate to strike her, and he wanted to know from the saint whether he was wrong. He then declared that the other two were no different. The knight had received a national treasure from the emperor in order to eliminate him after the monster was slain. The cowardly emperor had acted with extreme caution, fearing that the hero might seize his throne. The knight could not understand how the hero knew all of this. As for the mage, he was someone who loved human experimentation, and he seemed to hate Hyun-seok simply because Hyun-seok opposed the system of slavery. In short, the fact that they intended to kill the hero after the monster's death was something Hyun-seok had known for the past 5 years. The monster could not understand the hero. With all the power he had used to corner it, Hyun-seok could have easily destroyed the world that had turned its blades against him. Hyun-seok explained that he had not done so because he wanted to return home. The monster could not grasp his reasoning, and the scene then shifted to Earth 20 years earlier. Hyun-seok had been an ordinary 30-year-old office worker until he was guided by a being called a goddess and transported to another world. There, he was chosen as the hero destined to save that world from monsters. In the end, Hyun-seok knew there were many stories like this, stories of ordinary people achieving greatness in another world. However, the world he arrived in was a disaster in itself. He tried every conceivable method to return to Earth, but the main objective, defeating the monsters and saving the world, always pursued him. There was only one path, and so for 20 years he trained to fight monsters, proving that nothing can defeat a patient man. He vividly remembered the time he asked to enter a village and was blocked by several men. Even after explaining that he had rescued a child from that village, those men were unwilling to let him in, revealing that the child would die anyway. In that alternate world, everything was reversed. The world chose to abandon the wounded instead of saving them. It was unbelievably cruel to Hyun-sok, but the most serious problem was the medieval level of medicine and hygiene, where healing infections often meant tearing pieces of flesh away or using similarly brutal methods. So the boy was going to lose his leg just to prevent a simple infection from taking over. All the healers had been mobilized for the battle, and there was no one left to treat the wounded. Hyun-seok thought things couldn't possibly get any worse. Then he was found by several priests while carrying the child in his arms. They knew the child had been captured by monsters and wanted to understand how the hero had managed to recover the child. That was when something horrifying happened. It seemed the child had survived because a demon had possessed them. The priests decided they needed to exorcise the demon, taking advantage of the fact that they were already exorcising several other people. They believed the hero would not oppose the will of God. Hyun-seok realized that those repulsive beings from another world had no concept of human rights. And after enduring that world for 20 years, he had finally completed the mission given to him. Soon after, he demanded that the so-called goddess, who had practically seduced him in the desert when he was a fool, fulfill her promise. Suddenly, a hole opened in the sky, and a blonde woman emerged. This is where you understand why Hyun-seok had been such a simp. Understandable. Have a nice day. She declared that he had worked hard and that through his relentless efforts, he had defeated the monster. Hyun-seok immediately grew anxious and asked whether she remembered him, since he had subdued all the monsters. That meant all the experiences and memories he had gained there. Even his soul would be perfectly preserved, and she would send him back to Earth. The goddess smiled as she listened, knowing full well that he truly hated that world. Still, she asked whether he felt the same way even after gaining enough power to become a threat to her, warning him that if he returned to Earth, all of his achievements as a hero would be nullified. Hyun-seok didn't like that at all and felt she was merely relieved that he was leaving, just as promised. The goddess then revealed that the world no longer needed a monster and asked whether the hero would regret his decision. But there was only one thing Hyun-seok wanted: to return to the world he knew and nothing else. The goddess confirmed it, and that cursed world was finally left behind. Suddenly, a powerful light rushed toward Hyun-seok, and the goddess explained that his physical body on Earth had already perished, so she would place his soul into a new vessel. Hyun-seok grew worried and asked where he was going. The goddess said she could not explain in detail, but that it was a body destined for a miserable end, though she was confident he would survive. In the end, Hyun-seok wanted to return to Earth so badly that he didn't care about coming back in a body with a terrible fate. He didn't care what destiny awaited him, because he was certain it would be far better than the life he had endured in that other world. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and asked himself whether he had truly returned. He was on Earth in the year 2025. The hero Lee Hyun-seok now inhabited the body of an ordinary civilian named Yoo Chan-sok. He thought about those damn traitors from the other world and found it wonderful that he would never have to see their faces again. Then he noticed a mirror and saw his appearance. From that moment onward, the hero couldn't believe he had really returned to Earth. The scene shifted to him staring at clean water flowing from a faucet. He felt immense joy seeing that it wasn't contaminated, something that felt more real to him than magic itself. He even thought that all mages could go to hell. Then he turned on the stove and couldn't believe he could produce fire just by pressing a button without needing to chop wood or build a campfire. And there was something else he had been missing. He had a box of fried chicken and began drooling the moment he picked up a piece, proof of how much he had suffered in the other world. After taking a bite, he started trembling. It had been so long since he had tasted the true flavor of real food. He cried, having missed all of this deeply. At last, he could live a normal life again. First, he needed to readjust to Earth, since it was now 2025. He noticed that the time flow of the other world had aligned with this one, but none of that mattered to him. He didn't care if adapting would be difficult or harsh. Nothing could be worse than that other world. The scene then changed to Chan-seok taking a hot shower. He found it incredible that he didn't have to wait for the water to heat up. He was equally amazed by the cold air that came out at the push of a button. Even under a clear, bright sky, he was stunned by how completely different everything was compared to the filthy other world he had lived in. Chan-seok wondered what he should do first in 2025. Maybe start with StarCraft. But then, he was suddenly startled by a strange creature and wondered what on earth was standing right in front of him. Soon, an announcement rang out to all residents, warning that a corrosion rift had appeared inside the apartment complex. Chanseok had no idea what that was, and then came the order for all residents to evacuate immediately to the underground shelter. Chanseok grew more and more confused when, all of a sudden, he saw several creatures nearby. They looked like monkeys, and quickly began smashing the window glass. Chanseok started running, but those creatures soon caught up to him on the stairwell. All Chanseok wanted was to understand what the hell was happening on Earth. He managed to hide, and the strange creatures passed right by him. That was when he came across a child. Chanseok warned the boy that the area was dangerous and that he should run to the shelter. The kid then asked if Chanseok had seen where the monsters went. Completely baffled, Chanseok listened as the boy explained that he was going to kill the monsters and wanted to know if Chanseok would do the same. Chanseok became even more confused when the boy added that people said the Earth had been like this for 13 years already. Chanseok felt a deep sense of despair upon hearing that. The boy stubbornly refused to go to the shelter, and Chanseok felt he couldn't leave the kid alone. In the end, he stayed with the boy, who explained that a corrosion rift was an exit from which monsters emerged. No one knew why they formed or when and where they would appear. Chanseok was furious. After enduring all that hell in another world just to return to Earth, he discovered that this place had also turned into an infernal pit. He felt an overwhelming rage toward that goddess. Then the boy suddenly realized something and wondered why Chanseok knew nothing about all of this. Chanseok gave a flimsy excuse, saying he had been living in America for a while. The kid was shocked and asked how Chanseok had managed that, mentioning that the President of the United States had been impeached for secretly trying to send his daughter to Korea. Chanseok became increasingly overwhelmed by the information being thrown at him. Trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, Chanseok asked about the hunter the boy admired. The kid said her name was Lee Seani, a hunter from a guild called Janabi. She ranked 10th on Earth, wielded a massive sword as her main weapon, and was currently in Chiorwan, dealing with a corrosion rift. Chanseok felt relieved that he had managed to change the subject naturally, but he found it strange that an ordinary human could fight monsters, just like the world he had once been summoned to. He wanted to understand how that was even possible. The boy added that he really liked Lee Seun's sword and that there was a must-watch video about it on social media. Suddenly, Chanseok covered the boy's mouth. The kid didn't understand why, but Chanseok had sensed something wrong. He had done it because there were many monsters nearby, exactly 6, including the one they were hiding from. He felt that this body possessed above-average strength, and he was used to fighting multiple enemies at once, so he believed it wouldn't be too difficult. Still, he didn't know what to do about the kid. He couldn't leave him alone, and he didn't have a proper weapon. That was when he noticed something floating in the air and wondered if it was mana. In the end, he was almost certain it was the same thing he had seen in the other world. He gathered that mana and hurled it at one of the creatures, which looked completely confused. The mana Chanseok had accumulated over 20 years was gone, but if mana existed in the air, that meant he could still use the paradox flame, since it was rooted in his soul. To him, the power of fire felt disappointing, but it would be more than enough here. The boy, witnessing what Chanseok had just done, was amazed. He hadn't imagined that Chanseok possessed a unique ability, and that was how Chanseok learned what they called such things in this world. The boy then warned him that the official Hunter Academy YouTube channel said confirming a kill was important. Chanseok saw the kid approaching the creature, which was a problem. While the paradox flame was still active, it wasn't advisable to get close until the target was fully dead. The creature lunged toward the boy, but Chanseok shielded him and admitted that he had no idea what YouTube was, though he thought it would be better if the kid stopped watching it. Chanseok asked if he could borrow the staff the boy was holding. The kid handed it over, and using the combat skills he had gained as a hero in the other world, Chanseok cut down several of the creatures. The boy was visibly shocked and asked whether Chanseok was secretly a hunter. Chanseok wasn't happy at all. He never imagined he would smell blood again after returning to Earth. He had endured all that hell hoping to finally rest in peace. But if Earth was like this now, then it was no different from that other world. The scene shifted to a group of people gathered together, with Chanseok arriving alongside the boy. A woman called out to the child child whose name was Yoon Seong. She asked whether Chan Seok had brought Yoon Seong there and thanked him profusely, saying her son was very reckless. At that moment, Chan Seok noticed that Yoon Seong's mother wore luxury earrings and designer clothes. The kid was loaded, and that explained a lot to Chan Seok. Suddenly, a tremor occurred, and a monster immediately smashed through the wall, baring its teeth. Everyone began to run in desperation after seeing that the shelter wall had collapsed. Yoon Seong shouted for Chan Seok to escape right away, while Chan Seok was suffering greatly at that moment. Because he felt he wasn't asking for much, he just wanted to return to the world he knew. He wanted to go back home, which he missed dearly, and he didn't believe he had asked for too much. Soon he called Yoon Seong a brat, which greatly irritated Yoon Seong. Chan Seok wanted to know why Yoon Seong wanted to become a hunter, even though he was rich. From Chan Seok's point of view, Yoon Seong could simply hide in a safe place and live comfortably. There was no need to fight. Yoon Seong then explained that he had lost his father to a monster. A corrosion rift had opened in what he thought was a safe place, a subterranean bunker. That was when the boy realized there was no safe place on Earth. So even though he was not yet as strong as Chan Seok and monsters were still terrifying, he wanted to become the strongest hunter and eliminate all the corrosion rifts. Yoon Seong was determined to save the world. He knew it might sound foolish to Chan Seok, but he still wanted to do it. In response, Chan Seok made it clear that Yoon Seong would not become a great hunter, declaring that the kid would never be able to save the world. Yoon Seong's mother soon told her son that it was enough, and that they should run immediately. Suddenly they heard a loud noise, and Chan Seok stated once again that Yoon Seong would not be the great hunter who saved the world, because he would be the one to do it. He thought it was better to leave the job of saving the world to someone who had already done it before. In the end, the man had been summoned to another world, fought monsters for 20 years, and when he returned to Earth, he couldn't even enjoy his freedom, as he was immediately confronted by a corrosion rift. He survived using the experience he had gained in his past life and promised a child that he would save the world. But the truth was that Chan Seok did absolutely nothing. He just played on his computer without a care. When he won the match, he found it very easy. He knew that someone who had saved the world once could do it again. But he wasn't really interested. He had said all of that very confidently in front of many people, but he truly didn't want to do it anymore. The desire to save the world had already faded. At that moment, he had games and abundant food, things he could only dream of in the other world. Not to mention a system where he could do anything with just a touch. Besides, when it came to saving the world, there were already hunters for that. He looked at his smartphone to order some deliveries until he realized he had spent all of his compensation. The original owner of that body had been an employee of a logistics company and lost his job when the company went bankrupt due to a corrosion rift. Now Chan Seok's severance pay was gone. He had already been trying to find a new job, but he could see there was no chance of getting a normal one. Because of the constant appearance of corrosion rifts, most companies were going bankrupt. Chan Seok began to wonder what he should do. After all, he needed a job to survive. Then he saw a recruitment notice for hunters, and in any case, he had experience in that line of work. The scene then shifted to the Hunters Association, where several people were feeling anxious because they wanted to become hunters. There were many people there until suddenly Lee Seon appeared, catching everyone by surprise. She was the hunter Yoon Seong talked about so much. Soon, everyone began to believe she was there to see someone. Seon noticed a Hunter Academy graduate named Han Sanga, whose awakened ability was electrokinesis. Seon didn't believe Sanga was that strong, while the agent Benader thought Sanga was quite skilled and would be useful. However, Seon reminded the agent that hunting in a corrosion rift was real combat. Lee Seon knew that practice and real combat were completely different. It was hard for Academy students who had only trained in safe environments to endure the real thing, so it would take Sanga a long time to adapt. She also thought the team leader should be aware of this, and she wasn't entirely sure whether she herself could stay out in the field for the entire week. Then the narrator announced that the first match was about to begin. In any case, Seon was there to do the job she had been assigned. She was there to recruit. The narrator then announced that the candidate was interesting because he was a civilian who wasn't even from the Hunter Academy, which was highly unusual, and he wondered what kind of courage a man like that had to be standing on that stage. Soon he introduced the candidate Yu Chan Seok to everyone. Chan Seok had not yet gotten used to his new name. The rules stated that personal weapons not provided by the association were not allowed, and inflicting life-threatening injuries was prohibited. In the end, Chan-seok had truly decided to become a hunter. The first thing he had to do was actually save the world that was destined to fall. But at the same time, he needed to live well and eat well. His opponent found everything that was happening unbelievable. Chan-seok needed to achieve good results in that tournament, and so the narrator began the battle. Chan-seok's opponent laughed because his opponent couldn't even gather mana. He thought the match would be very easy to win, introducing himself as the undefeated Spearmaster of the Hunter Academy. However, he couldn't land a single attack. Chan-seok had disappeared and suddenly appeared behind him, telling his opponent that he was quite clumsy with a spear. With that, he struck his opponent hard in the stomach, and without wasting time, followed up with another blow to the chin. His opponent was practically defeated already, and Chan-seok didn't like it at all because it didn't last long. He had simply used his bare hands because he thought that if he used a spear, he would injure his opponent too quickly. In the end, he realized his opponent was just a beginner, and he hoped that wasn't common among hunters. Seon was impressed by what she had just seen and soon checked Chan-seok's data, unable to understand why his previous job had been at a logistics company. One of the agents pointed out that he had no mana accumulated in his body, so they found it very strange that Chan-seok had such power, since he would normally need to accumulate mana for that. In the end, they believed it had just been luck. Seon then gave her agent a candy to make him shut up. She believed that Chan-seok was not intentionally accumulating mana and wanted to understand how that was possible. Chan-seok felt a bit uncomfortable, but he knew he needed to prove his skills. He prepared another strike, telling his opponent not to worry because he wouldn't deal a fatal injury. And with that, Chan-seok finished him off. Soon, many people began talking about Chan-seok. Seon stayed alert because while some were busy evaluating him, she needed to make her move. She wanted to see Chan-seok's true abilities. An agent asked where she was going, and Seon replied that she was going to see the association's president. Then the scene shifted to Chan-seok beating up another opponent he considered very weak. He didn't understand it. These rookies wanted to become hunters, but they were extremely weak. No matter how much he fought, it felt like everyone was on the same level. This made him curious about what they actually taught at the Hunter Academy. Chan-seok wondered if there was no one decent there, until Sangha appeared and caught the attention of some losers who thought she looked stunning. She was the final candidate, and Chan-seok noticed that she had accumulated more mana than anyone he had faced. Sangha, in turn, could see up close that he wasn't accumulating any at all, so she believed he had gotten that far purely by luck. Chan-seok began to think that the academy must also teach generic phrases, since everyone kept saying the same thing. Sangha believed he didn't have a unique ability, since he was only throwing punches, and declared that she wouldn't go easy on him because of that. Chan-seok felt a little intimidated by her. In truth, he did have a unique ability, but he thought it was better not to use it so as not to seriously injure people. Sangha took a breath and prepared to strike with her sword. She rushed toward Chan-seok and he made a huge jump. Sangha couldn't believe he had dodged it just by jumping. Chan-seok found the way her power worked interesting. She ran an electric current through the scabbard and the blade, turning it into magnetic force. It was as if she had created a railgun. He praised her ability, saying it was the most impressive he had seen so far, but added that she had missed the most important thing. Sangha asked what he meant. Chan-seok explained that when she was thinking about attacking, she was too focused on speed. Her mistake was that, to accelerate the drawn sword even faster, she placed the magnetic rail in empty air. No matter how fast or powerful it was, Chan-seok thought he'd be an idiot to stand still while an attack like that came at him. Sangha thought he was extremely arrogant and said she could defeat someone like him even without using her technique. Chan-seok moved toward her and thought she was the idiot. He had already dodged her fastest attack, so there was no way she could hit him. The comment only made Sangha even angrier. She began gathering a large amount of mana, and Chan-seok knew she was overdoing it. She was forcing herself to accumulate mana, and if she continued like that, her body would be completely destroyed. He approached her, admitting that the fight had been quite fun, but that they should end it there. He told her to raise her left hand if it hurt, and then he struck her hard in the stomach. Sangha was completely battered after he landed several blows on her. and he finished it with a powerful punch to her face, sending her flying as blood sprayed from her nose. Sanga, who until then had been the promise of that selection, simply collapsed like a ripe fruit falling to the ground, leaving many spectators stunned. After all, she was the Academy's top student, and that was how Chan-seok became the talk of the moment. Chan-seok truly acknowledged that she was more skilled than the other guys, but to him, Sanga had neglected her physical training and relied solely on mana. Then he heard a noise coming from her and thought she hadn't given up, but in truth, Sanga was raising her left hand, trembling heavily. He clearly remembered that he had told her to do that if it hurt too much. Soon, a subordinate went to the narrator and brought him a notice that needed to be announced to everyone. The narrator informed them that the tournament schedule would be changed and asked Chan-seok to take a short break. Chan-seok didn't quite understand, as he thought the tournament was over. However, the narrator announced that Chan-seok himself would have a special match against an active hunter, organized with special permission from the association's president. Chan-seok saw the opponent's name appear on the monitor, visible only to the audience, and judging by their reactions, he believed it was a very skilled huntress. He soon realized that this huntress wanted to test his abilities, and he noticed that Earth and that strange world really weren't so different in some ways. Soon, Siyun appeared, dragging her sword along the ground. She confirmed Chan-seok's name and apologized for appearing so suddenly, explaining that this was the only way to verify his abilities. She introduced herself and remarked that the stage was far too small for him. She then invited him to fight her, adding that he could refuse if it was too much. She would understand since it was very sudden. Chan-seok immediately recognized her as the hunter ranked 10th in the world. Moreover, the aura emanating from her body showed that she was a true professional. In his current condition, it would be unlikely for him to defeat her, but he was willing to fight anyway, and so he accepted. The narrator was confused, while Chan-seok honestly stated that he hadn't expended much energy yet. Siyun thought Chan-seok was very enthusiastic. In any case, Chan-seok saw only benefits in fighting her. He had already achieved the best possible results in the tournament. She was also the perfect opponent to prove what he was capable of, and he believed that fighting her would raise his value. Everyone was stunned. Siyun moved incredibly fast, and Chan-seok blocked her movement, but he couldn't understand how a woman's body could hold so much power. The clash between his weapon and her sword sent a shock through him. Siyun tried to strike again, and he backed away. Compared to the beginning, his speed had dropped considerably, and he was extremely tired. He couldn't see a single opening in the 10th best hunter in the world, and he also realized that this body simply didn't have the physical capacity to push much further. Siyun remarked that she had been hoping for a good warm-up for the first time in a long while, but she could see that he was suffering from extreme fatigue. Even so, she thought he did well and believed he could last 5 minutes, but he exceeded her expectations by enduring for 30 minutes. Then Siyun moved toward him, wanting to make things easier for Chan-seok, since he had almost no mana stored, and there wasn't much mana in the atmosphere either. In the end, he didn't want to use what he felt he needed to use at that moment, but he was running out of options. Quickly, he activated the Flame of Paradox. Siyun tried to strike him, but he managed to dodge. She had swung her sword with enough force that he shouldn't have been able to evade it, and she watched in surprise as he suddenly began to burn. The Flame of Paradox was the specialty he had used constantly before returning to Earth, and he trusted that power. His clothes remained intact, because unlike normal flames, the black flame could not burn matter. Instead, each of those flames burned using abstract concepts that he designated as fuel. With his current power, he couldn't burn concepts with high ignition points, such as his own self, memories, or reason. Thus, the concept he chose to burn at that moment was fatigue. He made a move, and Siyun saw that he had suddenly become faster. Chan-seok tried to strike her, and Siyun blocked the attack, wanting to know whether he had truly recovered in such a short time. Soon, she tried to strike him with multiple attacks. Chan-seok blocked every single one, and Siyun wanted to understand what was going on. The concentration of mana in the air fluctuated between high and low, yet the arena's settings hadn't changed, so she needed to grasp what was really happening. Just as fire releases heat when it burns matter, the Flame of Paradox also releases mana when it burns abstract concepts. Chan-seok basically used mana to ignite the Flame of Paradox, and in turn, his ability burned his fatigue to generate even more mana. It was an endless cycle. In other words, his specialty was like someone grabbing another person's leg and never letting go. Seon tried to attack again and failed once more, and she wondered how long he intended to keep going like that. Chan Seok's ability was essentially a war of attrition, and he made it clear to the huntress that he could still continue. He even flirted, asking whether she happened to like guys who didn't know when to give up. However, Seon shot him down, making it clear that she hated that type of guy. When a tree is set on fire, only ashes are left behind, and ashes that have already burned cannot be burned again. In the same way, the flame of paradox leaves residue. If everything is burned until only ashes remain, that is the moment when the flame of paradox disappears. At that point, Seon saw that Chan Seok had endured for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Seeing that he had lasted that long, she asked if he wanted a little more time, but all he wanted at that moment was to be spared. Soon, the narrator announced Seon as the winner. Suddenly, she pulled out a lollipop, and the men who accompanied her were surprised to see it. Seon gave the lollipop to Chan Seok for his hard work and revealed that she had placed her business card inside it. Chan Seok looked at her card, and Seon told him they would talk about the details later. For now, he just needed to call her. In the end, the hunter selection was concluded, and Chan Seok had to go up on stage to receive his prize. At that moment, Chan Seok realized that Janabi was a hunter agency. The scene then shifted abruptly. He was eating the lollipop while looking at his smartphone and discovered that it contained a hunter's license. He thought it was extremely high-tech. Back in his time, they only handed out a piece of paper. He also saw that there were many options he needed to review. It really had everything. Suddenly, a man appeared and confirmed Chan Seok's name, saying that Chan Seok looked better in person than on camera. Chan Seok couldn't help but notice that the man was very tall, seeming to be over 2 meters in height. Curious about who he was, Chan Seok received a business card from what looked like a streetlight pole. He was a hunter named Yoon Seong Hyun from the Taebak Guild, and he was there to invite Chan Seok to join his team. If Chan Seok gained enough experience with them, Hyun guaranteed that he would shine. Chan Seok didn't think it sounded like empty sales talk, but he remembered that Seon had also given him her number. He already had a prior commitment, so he couldn't give a definitive answer to the streetlight pole. He explained that he would think a bit more before making a decision. Hyun gave him all the time he needed, but advised him to think very carefully about the choice he would make, then said goodbye. Chan Seok was startled and thought it would be best to definitely skip Taebak. Next, the scene showed Seon answering Chan Seok's call, as he wanted to know where he was supposed to go. She told him she was at the cabin, the second floor of the Hunters Association building, and sent him the location. Chan Seok went to the cabin, where a very cheerful receptionist greeted him. Soon, Seon welcomed him and revealed that he had arrived early. Chan Seok thought the cafe there had a familiar name, and Seon asked if something had happened. Chan Seok revealed that a guy had tried to recruit him into a guild, explaining that the man was gigantic. Seon immediately guessed it was Hyun. Since he had shown interest in Chan Seok, the other guilds would certainly no longer dare to make an offer. Chan Seok then asked whether that didn't mean the same thing for Janabi. At that moment, Seon made it clear that she had no intention of recruiting him, which obviously left Chan Seok confused. She asked what he thought about working without being affiliated with a guild, like a freelancer, and Chan Seok was surprised to learn that he didn't need to belong to a guild. Seon believed that Hyun would offer Chan Seok a junior position, and he didn't understand where she was going with that. She explained that he would be a partner hunter. She also reminded him that he wasn't from the Hunter Academy. She explained that hunter rankings within a guild were divided into 3 types: junior, senior, and partner. Juniors and seniors belong to teams led by partner hunters, so they are essentially salaried employees. Partner hunters, on the other hand, hold shares in the guild instead of receiving a salary. They share in the net profits the guild earns. It was basically like a law office for Chan Seok, and until then he had heard that hunters had founded guilds using law firms as their model. So Seon stated that he didn't necessarily need to belong to a guild or go through the junior and senior rankings to become a partner hunter. Chan Seok understood, and if he became famous and achieved respectable results, they would automatically come looking for him. Seon was happy and confirmed this, even offering him a piece of candy, though Chan Seok didn't understand why she was doing that. In the end, he thought it would be difficult for him to receive any proper requests, since he still had no connections or experience. Seon made it very clear that she would help him with that for free. But Chan Seok thought that when charity is too generous, the saint becomes suspicious. He couldn't see any reason for her to help him and and Seon explained that in the future, when he had built his reputation enough to be recruited by a guild, all she wanted was for him to remember that there was a place called Janabi. That would be how he repaid his debt to her. She also handed him an envelope, telling him he could take a look at it if he wanted, and giving him complete freedom of choice, showing that there was no obligation at all. Chon Seok wanted to know what it was, and Seon revealed that it was a request from his home city of Incheon. There was a place called Gyeodongdo Island, where a corrosion zone had formed 2 years earlier, after a failed attempt to eliminate a corrosion rift. Chon Seok asked if he just had to get rid of that rift, but Seon made it clear that it wasn't that simple. He would have to patrol Gyeodongdo Island, and if he found any additional corrosion rifts, then he would need to eliminate them. Chon Seok saw that the mission would start in a month and that he would earn 15 million won if he succeeded. Considering that it was a life-threatening job, the pay wasn't very good. Seon thought that if he felt it was unfair, he should become stronger and more famous. That way, the money would start flowing into his pocket. She asked for his answer, and he obviously accepted. The scene then shifted to a limousine, where Seon was on a call with someone who wanted to know if Chon Seok was any good. Seon gave all the information about him, making it clear that he had completed the tournament using only his bare hands, even though the tournament required everyone to use weapons. She also revealed that he had endured fighting against her for 4 hours. The person on the call was incredulous and asked whether Seon had limited her powers. The person on the call was her boss, and she reminded him that she was a veteran hunter with 10 years of experience, all of it built by surviving hellish places. She should normally have been able to toy with him, but 4 hours was something she truly hadn't expected. She strongly doubted she would ever find someone like Chon Seok again. The scene then showed the city of Incheon and Gyeodongdo Island. Seon's boss thought it didn't matter how highly she evaluated him, because the mission on Gyeodongdo Island specifically required hunters with prior mission experience. Chon Seok's skills might be excellent, but there was no way to know whether he would perform well working in a team with veteran hunters. However, Seon believed her boss didn't need to worry, because she had placed him with someone trustworthy. The boss preferred to trust Seon, since she was the brains of the operation, but he also wanted to know how she believed Chon Seok could reach her level. Seon then stated that if Chon Seok ever reached her level, he would also be able to defeat her boss. Suddenly, the scene shifted to 1 month earlier. A man was delivering a package to apartment 1506 and thought it was incredibly heavy. The package was for Chon Seok, and after receiving it, he saw that it was unbelievably long and thought that a spear would go well with it. He then picked up an elixir, a type of potion hunters use in emergencies. It contained condensed mana, which was very useful when mana was urgently needed. The common way of dealing with mana was like drinking water from a water purifier. Mana is controlled by the individual in the atmosphere and stored in the body, then used when necessary. The elixir allowed this process to be done in a short period of time. However, Chon Seok used mana in a different way from others. He skipped the storage process and directly absorbed and used the mana from the atmosphere. The advantage was there was no limit, since he used the mana in the air. There was also the matter of the process of absorbing and releasing mana through the channels it passes through, which gradually strengthen and allow the amount of mana that can be used to increase. The downside was that until those mana channels grew, the amount he could control was small, making it difficult to produce a strong output in a short period of time. Chon Seok didn't have time to wait at that moment, so he decided to store some mana before using it. Chon Seok believed that by training with the elixir for about 1 month, he should be able to grow as much as he needed. The scene then shifted to Gyeodongdo Island, where there were many people confirming their identities using QR codes. Chon Seok was soon placed in Squad 8, and he overheard many people complaining that they wanted better pay and were also afraid, until Sangha called out to him. Chon Seok thought her hair looked different, but Sangha clarified that her hair was normal and that it was just static electricity from before. In the end, they were in the same squad, and she thought that was great. She hoped they could work together on that mission. Chon Seok didn't see any reason for it, and Sangha explained that he was stronger than her, so she could observe him and learn from him. Chon Seok pretended to be surprised and said that his shoulders were practically about to fall off. Sangha didn't understand the irony and warned that if he had chronic dislocations, it would be very dangerous. Chon Seok realized she had no sense of humor. Soon, the person in charge of the mission called Squad 8, since everyone was gathered, and gave them an overview of the mission. After all, they were aware that some hunters were participating in a mission for the first time. Chon Seok paid full attention as they explained that corrosion rifts are classified as Class 1, 2, and 3. The closer a rift is to Class 1, the more dangerous it is. The first corrosion rift to appear in a specific area is also given the additional designation Alpha. The location of the Alpha corrosion rift on Gyeodongdo Island was at a church in the northern part of the island, although it had not yet been classified, and considering that corrosion rifts grow stronger over time, the person in charge asked Squad 8 not to approach the corrosion rift, reminding them that their mission was only to patrol and identify, eliminating any additional corrosion fissures that might appear. However, some members of Squad 8 didn't like the idea of an elimination mission for a squad that included a rookie. Before long, people started making comments that showed their concern, and Chansok was shocked, thinking they were being overly dramatic. As they began to move out, they were informed that the island was being monitored by the offshore team in the control room, so they could get in touch and request support whenever needed. Some of them started planning, but Chansok stated that they would explore the two areas over the course of a week. The members of his squad didn't understand, and Chansok explained that they would set up a base at Hwagyesa and operate from there. He showed the map on his smartphone, and the others began to judge him, thinking he was just an interfering nobody they had never heard of. They also didn't understand why they would set up a base at Hwagyesa. Chansok explained that from Hwagyesa they could see Yupnaeri, and from the peak of Hwagyesa they could see Gyeodongmyeon directly. In addition, the old temple building was still there, and they could use that place as lodging. The others grew quite irritated with Chansok. One of them pointed out that there were many places nearby where they could stay, while another was worried about being surrounded and then having to climb a mountain. Chanseok saw no sense in that, since they weren't fighting thousands of enemies. There was no way they could be surrounded there. In any case, they didn't want to follow the orders of a hunter they considered inexperienced. Chanseok realized that idiots who defied logic existed in every world. Eventually, Chanseok thought it would be better for them to act separately. The scene then shifted to the middle of the forest, where they were all running. Chanseok expected Sangha to be running behind him, but he was curious about the man running alongside them. He sensed that the man had slightly more mana than Sangha. The man had introduced himself earlier. His name was Kim Minji. Chansok was curious about why Minji had followed them. Minji knew it was the first mission for both of them and didn't want the rookies to act alone. Chansok was actually grateful to Minji for his consideration. In the end, Chansok began to believe that there was at least one decent person in that squad. Suddenly, he realized something and asked everyone to stop. He told the two of them to hide. All of a sudden, numerous monsters appeared nearby. Minjae thought they should avoid all of those monsters, since it looked like there were at least 50 of the creatures. Chanseok immediately asked what Minjae's unique ability was. Minjae was startled by the question, because he sensed that Chanseok was eager to fight. Chanseok believed it was natural for a hunter to fight corrosion creatures, which was why he wanted to know Minjae's unique ability. Minjae then revealed that his unique ability was flame. Chanseok asked which technique Minjae was most confident in, and Minjae said he trusted his fireball the most. Chanseok told him he would give the signal, and Minjae should attack then. Minjae couldn't believe it. Sangha asked what she should do, and Minjae couldn't believe that Sangha was also willing. He warned that it wasn't prudent for just 3 people to face 50 monsters, especially since it was their first mission. Minjae thought it would be better to contact the other hunters by radio. Chanseok immediately told Minji that those hunters wouldn't arrive in time. Unlike them, who had headed straight for Hwagyesa Temple, the other hunters were currently searching along the coast. In Chanseok's view, it would be reckless to contact them by radio, since there was no guarantee the hunters would even hear the call. There was also the issue that if they waited for those monsters to disperse, they could become a threat to the other hunters. Minji acknowledged that Chanseok was right, and even if there were a hunter nearby, they wouldn't be able to arrive immediately because of the previous conflict. Chanseok quickly told the two of them that they had to deal with those monsters. Even if they were at a disadvantage, it was something that truly needed to be done, and he thought they should carry out a surprise attack. There wasn't much time, but he began drawing on the ground. Soon, he laid out a plan for the two of them. Minji thought that Chan-seok had come up with a very detailed strategy and had even anticipated every possibility. He began to feel that Chan-seok had experienced that kind of battle countless times, and he wondered if Chan-seok came from another world. The scene then shifted to Minjae leaping forward and hurling a fireball at the creatures, blowing some of them apart. Minji then told his partners that he needed some time before he could fire the next fireball. Chan-seok immediately told him to shoot as soon as he was ready. Chan-seok then used his spear to attack the monsters. He prioritized efficiency in battle, and to achieve maximum efficiency, dividing roles was essential. While the next fireball was being prepared, he would handle the others so they couldn't get close to Minji. Clearly, he couldn't block all the monsters by himself, which was why dividing roles was important. At that moment, Sanga drew her sword and joined the attack. Minji then told Chan-seok that he was ready, and Chan-seok told him to fire. The attack went off successfully, and a massive explosion occurred. In this way, they managed to kill all the monsters. Chan-seok leaped away to avoid the fireball and ended up burying his spear in the ground, just as he was about to tell his companions that they had all done a great job. Minjae suddenly pulled out a device and pointed it at him, then started smiling, asking Chan-seok to step back a little. Chan-seok was startled, thinking Minjae was about to shoot him. In the end, Minji was holding a gun that implanted microchips. He explained to Chan-seok and Sanga that once the mission was over and safety was secured, the scrap dealer he had hired would come to retrieve the creatures. Chan-seok didn't quite understand, so Minji explained that it was difficult to recover byproducts directly from corpses, since they were bulky and heavy. So he implanted those chips so that after the mission, a team contracted by the guild could collect everything of value. That was a way to make money. He split the profits with those who gathered the materials. Scrap collectors received a commission and returned the rest to the family of a fallen hunter if that hunter ended up dying. Chan-seok wasn't sure whether he could really trust those people, and Minjae made it clear that this was why it was necessary to find a reliable scrap dealer and sign a contract. Minjae also thought Chan-seok was incredible, since they had managed to take down 50 monsters. At that moment, an enormous monster appeared and attacked them all. Chan-seok reacted quickly and managed to protect Minji, asking if he was okay. Minji was completely confused. Chan-seok believed they were facing an intermediate boss or something similar, and he immediately began to lament, thinking that this was the leader of the monsters they had killed. The amount of magical power it possessed was absurd, completely different from that of the smaller monsters. He then warned his two mission partners not to interfere, saying he would handle it. The two of them were worried about Chan-seok and thought they should fight together to buy time, but Chan-seok made it very clear that they should retreat and leave that big problem to him. The way he spoke frightened them. In the end, Chan-seok believed the best course of action was for him to deal with the monster alone. He could use the Flame of Paradox without worrying about his allies and finish it as quickly as possible, so he called the creature out to fight. Sanga and Minji stayed together, and Minji thought they should help Chan-seok, since he might be in danger. Sanga, however, didn't think it was necessary. It might have looked like Chan-seok was being pressured, but he hadn't been hit even once so far, and he was fighting the monster with his spear. But that wasn't all Sanga noticed. She knew that if it were her fighting, even just dodging those attacks would have been extremely difficult. She also saw that wherever the spear pierced, black flames clung to the wound. She wondered what the hell that was. The more those flames accumulated, the slower the monster became, and although Chan-seok had seemed to be struggling at first, Sanga could sense that at that moment her ally was playing with the monster. She was no longer sure he was a rookie hunter like her, because that simply wasn't possible. At that moment, the monster tried to attack Chan-seok, but he managed to dodge. He quickly threw his spear into the air, and Sanga's eyes widened at that move. Then they shouted for Chan-seok to be careful, as the monster was charging straight toward him. The monster ended up face to face with Chan-seok, and just as it was about to strike, the spear fell and landed squarely on its head, proving that Chan-seok was not messing around. He was surprised that the monster was still able to move even after burning through all of its physical strength. He then thought he should finish the monster off for good. His two allies were completely shocked, since they had seen that he was a rookie, yet clearly a capable one. Minjae thought that Chan-seok had been under heavy pressure at first, but now the monster was on the ground, so he wanted to understand what had happened. At that point, Chan-seok called out to Minjae Minji, asking whether it was normal for a monster like that to appear on Gyeodongdo Island. Minji explained that the monster was not even an erosion unit. If it had been one, it would have at least received a grade 3 classification. Chanseok clearly remembered hearing before the operation that the Alpha Erosion Unit on Gyeodongdo Island had not been classified. In that case, he thought that the Alpha Erosion Unit on Gyeodongdo must have been updated to grade 3, catching the two of them by surprise. Sanga also recalled that the person responsible for bringing in the missions had not mentioned that. Chanseok believed that if it was not grade 3, there was no way to explain the current situation, and Minjae grew worried, since the difference between an unranked hunter and a grade 3 hunter was immense. Because of that, Minji thought that perhaps no hunter would survive, and he believed they should save the other hunters. He trusted Chanseok's abilities, and thought they could do it, but Chanseok firmly rejected that possibility, leaving Minji confused. Chanseok did not know how he could find and save all the hunters wandering alone across that island. After all, he was not a god capable of doing such things. He reminded the two of them that their mission was to identify and eliminate any additional erosion units that had been generated, and that they should not expect anyone to die while carrying out such work. Sanga then wanted to know how he would feel if he were in that situation. Chanseok did not really understand what she meant, and she went on with that talk about how he would feel if there were no one available to help him. He saw no reason to do that, and made it clear that he was not saying those things because he failed to understand people's emotions. In the end, he was talking about the outcome. There were also unavoidable deaths in that world, and when facing a death like that, no matter what thoughts or emotions he might have, he knew he could die. Thus, he believed the two of them should not humiliate themselves in a hopeless situation. Thinking that they needed to change their way of thinking, since it was impossible to live in that world while thinking the way they did, the scene then shifted to night. They had arrived at the location, and the building was empty. There were no traces of other erosion creatures nearby either, and because it was dark, they could not see anything that required attention. Minjae thought it was good that the lights allowed them to see the positions of the other hunters. Chanseok, on the other hand, thought it was dangerous because it revealed their location. If something like that massive monster appeared again, things would go very badly. He believed it would be better to send a warning message to everyone about what had happened. Minjae and Sanga then explained that if they eliminated the core of the erosion unit, all erosion creatures would disappear, since those creatures needed the energy emitted by the erosion unit. Chanseok had not imagined it was that simple. The scene then shifted to Sanga and Minjae sleeping, while Chanseok remained awake. He placed an item near the two of them, believing that the button would sound an alarm if a monster appeared, allowing him to leave without worry. Chanseok wanted to finish everything once and for all, but suddenly he stopped running, realizing that he had the feeling things were going too smoothly. He then encountered another monster, which judged that Chanseok was a face it had never seen before. The scene then shifted to Gyeodongdo Island, specifically to the Hunters Association's Situation Room, where reports were coming in about hunters from Squad 5 who had gone missing. There were reports that the monsters were moving in an organized manner, and one man was desperate about everything that was happening, since it was an unclassified erosion that had turned into an emergency. They needed to call in reinforcements to help the hunters on the island. Then one of the staff members reported that someone was approaching the Alpha Erosion Core. However, the man in charge of all the monitoring did not like this at all and wanted the hunter who was doing that to be stopped. Soon, they identified that the one approaching the corrosion core was Chanseok from Squad 8, whom the monitoring system recognized as the first to have discovered the erosion and the core's update. The person in charge wanted to connect to the terminal to find out whether Chanseok was still alive, since a core update like that had never happened before. Because Chanseok had been the one to discover it, the head of monitoring believed that Chanseok would have the answer. Meanwhile, Chanseok was running, extremely irritated because the monster was much faster than he had expected. He thought the monitoring service was inefficient, since they were listening to everything he said, but were neither subjugating nor even properly investigating the situation. The workers in front of the computers soon became embarrassed, as Chanseok made it very clear that when he got the chance, he would shove an erosion core right in their faces. That was how they confirmed that Chanseok was alive. The problem for Chanseok was that the Flame of Paradox still did not have the ability to kill. In the end, he was finishing off his enemies with his spear after reducing their health with the Flame of Paradox. However, bringing down that gigantic monster would be difficult. To make matters worse, Chan Seok had used a great deal of the mana on Gyeodongdo Island while fighting the demonic bat, so he could not leave the island and needed to find a place there where he could extract mana. Eventually, he found what he truly wanted, the core. He wanted the monster to keep up with him because there was something he wanted to test, and suddenly the monitoring team lost Chan Seok's GPS signal. They soon reported that Chan Seok had entered the erosion core, leaving the head of the monitoring division extremely surprised. The scene then shifted to Chan Seok inside the core, where the place was cleaner than he had expected. He wondered about the size of Grade 1 and Grade 2 cores, since those cores did not spread so quickly, and he believed that the erosion core had released its limits. Thus, he thought it best to finish off that massive monster as soon as possible. One of the biggest problems of the Flame of Paradox for Chan Seok was that it spread to all living beings except himself, even if those living beings were his allies. If it reached a level he could no longer control, he would no longer be able to use his ability, and that was its greatest drawback. At that moment, he struck the monster with everything he had, and when he fought alone, that disadvantage practically ceased to exist. The real change began at that moment. The mana Chan Seok had absorbed from the monster spread through every corner of his body, making his meridians more resilient. He began to feel an efficiency far better than he had expected. As the monster made a great deal of noise, it was only then that Chan Seok understood what it was doing. It was calling for reinforcements. Several monsters appeared nearby, and Chan Seok thought it was a shame because the overwhelming number of monsters no longer meant anything to him. In any case, Chan Seok felt that he had grown stronger, though he was still far from what he had been in the other world. He wanted to know where the erosion core was, and he clearly remembered Minji explaining that the core was the most heavily eroded thing in that space. Suddenly a creature spoke, saying it would extinguish the fire, and appeared behind Chan Seok, catching him by surprise. The creature truly waited for the fire to go out, and Chan Seok was surprised that it had waited for his Flame of Paradox to fade. He realized that the erosion core was on a completely different level, and he immediately wondered whether he could perform a combination of 4 strikes at his current level. He then charged toward the erosion core, but the creature blocked the attack. However, Chan Seok's strike was so powerful that it caused the creature's weapon to begin cracking. Chan Seok then used a technique called the Twin Moon Spear, sending the creature flying away. That technique was quite fascinating. The Twin Moon Spear left behind a blue trail that formed along the path of Chan Seok's attack. This trail perfectly imitated the first strike, repeating it 4 times, and if he attacked along the side of the trail, it became a simple technique that delivered 4 consecutive blows. The creature tried to strike Chan Seok, but he dodged. The real danger was when the blue trail attacked after an impact, turning into a complicated circular twin spear dance that was extremely difficult to evade. Facing the delayed combined attack, Chan Seok already anticipated that his opponent would make a mistake. At that moment, the creature was struck, and Chan Seok believed the fight was over. He struck it again, destroying multiple parts of its body and causing it to nearly disintegrate. The creature then began to fade away, but it left something behind. This confused Chan Seok, as he believed the creature would simply vanish and everything would come to an end. Instead, he found himself holding some kind of box. He opened it without understanding what it was, and the scene shifted to show the monitoring center in chaos, as multiple erosion zones were spreading across Gyeodongdo Island. The head of monitoring was on the verge of a heart attack, as he no longer knew what to do. To make matters worse, they had also lost contact with Squad 9. At that moment, the head of monitoring was completely stunned, believing that everything was spiraling out of control and that only a miracle could reverse the situation. He did not want to see the hunters wiped out. Then someone called out to him and reported that Chan Seok had entered the Alpha Erosion Core. The head of monitoring could hardly believe it. They brought up the main screen, and it showed that the Alpha Erosion Core on Gyeodongdo Island was being released at that very moment, confirming that all erosive entities had been eliminated. The head of monitoring realized that a miracle truly had occurred, even if he still did not fully understand it. The scene then shifted to Chan Seok, who was looking up at the sky and feeling a pleasant breeze. Next, the scene moved to Sangha, who was cutting down several monsters with her sword. She was badly injured and deep in thought, since Chan Seok had disappeared. Minjae soon asked whether she still believed they had any chance of coming back alive, and Sangha could see that he was already at his limit. She herself was no longer confident she could hold out much longer. The creatures kept coming without pause. Sangha prepared herself to continue fighting, but things turned dire for her as she could no longer feel her legs. Minji realized how bad the situation had become, and just as Sangha had accepted that they would become food for those monsters, the monsters suddenly began to disintegrate, leaving them completely confused. Then the scene shifted to the hunters' rendezvous point on the island. Chanseok saw that many people there were injured and wondered whether things had gone completely crazy while he was gone. Everyone was utterly exhausted and could not understand how the rookie was still alive. They had all heard that he had single-handedly cleared a grade 3 erosion source. To the veterans, it made no sense at all. Minjae was sitting with Sangha and waved to Chanseok. He still could not believe the message Chanseok had sent him, unable to comprehend how Chanseok had decided to take down the source alone. Chanseok tried to explain, in other words, that he wanted to protect his fellow hunters. Since things had turned out in the best possible way, he chose to play the good guy and then made it clear to his two companions that if he had known it would turn out like this, he would have left before sunset. Then a man in a suit approached and introduced himself to Chanseok. His name was Byun Jong Tai, and he explained that he was the branch manager of the North District 3 of Gyeonggi-cheon, an operational corporation of Korea. Chanseok immediately asked whether Jong Tai was the one who had told him to go to the hunter's meeting point. Jong Tai asked for a moment of his time and informed him that the mayor wished to meet with him. The scene then shifted to Chanseok stepping out of a car. He thought that old men really did have a habit of ordering people around. Then he clearly remembered that the contract had not mentioned a reward for clearing a grade 3 threat, and since he was already there, he figured he might as well negotiate the price. At that moment, a young man was waiting for Chanseok to get out of the car, even as it was still raining. He introduced himself as Lee Piljae, the officer in charge of communication and cooperation. He led Chanseok inside, saying that the mayor was eager for the meeting. Piljae himself had been shocked when he received the report from Gyeonggi Island. It had caught the mayor's attention so strongly that he had canceled his entire schedule just to see Chanseok, though Chanseok did not even think he had done anything that special. Piljae believed Chanseok was greatly mistaken, because a rookie hunter destroying a grade 3 source alone was something that had not happened since the time of the first hunter, known as the Great Senior. In the end, Chanseok thought that it really had been quite difficult for him at his current level, but he had not imagined that someone else had once been capable of such a feat. He concluded that this so-called Great Senior must have been a true monster. Piljae then handed Chanseok over to the mayor, who immediately thanked him for coming from so far away and introduced himself. The mayor of Incheon was named Park Jian. Jian also apologized to Chanseok for calling him in at such a gloomy time, since it was raining, and invited him to sit down so they could talk. He also ordered Piljae to bring coffee for the two of them. Jian told Chanseok that, as if he did not already know, he had rendered a great service to the country. Jian confessed that Gyeonggi Island had been a major headache for him. He knew the problem had to be solved, but he did not have a large budget, so he could not hire expensive hunters. Chanseok realized that everything had turned out wonderfully for the mayor, since the issue had been resolved at a very low cost. The mayor did not deny it, and admitted that he was genuinely surprised that this had been Chanseok's first mission. He saw great talent in Chanseok, who had begun his journey in an incredible way. After all, the city where he served as mayor had become the safest place in Korea. In addition, Incheon's airport infrastructure was excellent, with countless logistics facilities already in place. There were also free economic zone projects, and international cities like Songdo and Cheongna were so flooded with foreign investors that it was difficult to choose between them. Incheon would grow even more after Chanseok had resolved that problem, and in this way the mayor assured the rookie hunter that his journey would be smooth and paved with success. At that moment, Chanseok remembered Jong Tai asking him what his purpose was in working as a hunter. Chanseok simply thought that if a clogged pipe was leaking filth, someone had to step into the dirty water to unclog it, and that metaphor worked quite well for Jong Tai. He believed Chanseok would become famous. Since capable hunters were incredibly popular, companies would want him for commercials, and famous programs would send casting offers. Chanseok then thought that Jong Tae was worried that fame might end up ruining him. In the end, Chan-seok only wanted to make enough money to live well and eat well, acquiring resources and moving around with the squad carrying bags of gear. Jung Tae did not deny that to the rookie hunter, as there were many cases of promising hunters who became intoxicated by fame and forgot their duty. He even thought it was natural for a hunter to lose their way a little. But on the other side of the ceasefire line, dangerous monsters still roamed the erosion zones. Up until then, Korea was the only safe place left and was called the last sanctuary of Earth. But even the sanctuary was being influenced by capital. Jung Tae reminded Chan-seok that he had accomplished something immense, and many people in difficult situations would become interested in him. He simply did not want Chan-seok to stop being a beacon of hope. Chan-seok, however, only wondered how much the mayor was going to offer after that speech. He could see that the mayor was essentially laying out silver on a platter without even trying to hide it. Unfortunately for the mayor, Chan-seok had lived many years and suffered through the same kinds of nonsense, so he would never be swayed by such things. Chan-seok then made it clear to the mayor that by providing so much support, he was expecting something in return, such as helping boost his declining approval ratings so he could be re-elected. Jian was quite surprised and realized that Chan-seok was sharp. Chan-seok excused himself by saying that smartphones provided information very quickly, and in any case, he knew that the mayor's term would end at the beginning of the coming year. Reading the atmosphere, the general consensus seemed to be that Jian's re-election was unlikely. The mayor was surprised that Chan-seok did not beat around the bush. He tried to explain to the hero that, in the process of participating in such a request, Chan-seok would need permission from the Incheon city government. Chan-seok saw that there was no way to refuse. He needed the mayor's approval to enter as a rookie. In any case, he knew the mayor could present it the right way and go around saying that he himself had discovered Chan-seok. By including Chan-seok in his narrative, his approval ratings would rise. Jian then explained that, thanks to the infrastructure he had mentioned, he maintained ties with many domestic and international companies. He even gave an example by showing a contract for the model of a certain coffee mix brand, whose contract was about to expire. Chan-seok's own face could take her place, and that was not all. The possibilities were endless. Chan-seok immediately thought that, to the mayor, he was actually quite cheap. The mayor was a little confused. Chan-seok had been watching the news, and the world was desperate for a new face to change the gloomy atmosphere. He clarified that everything the mayor was offering him were things he would obtain anyway at some point. Jian explained that Chan-seok could choose the highest paying requests, but Chan-seok promptly declared that the offer was not for him at all. He then took his leave of the mayor and asked him to pass along his congratulations to the coffee mix model, as he was sure she would be able to get the coffee brand to renew her contract with her. The scene then shifted outside, where it was still raining. In the end, a hooded figure remarked that the Gyeodongdo Island test had been a failure. A man in a suit apologized, but also said he had good news, revealing that he had a segment of the Hunter Association's qualification exam footage. On his smartphone, he showed Chan-seok fighting. The hooded figure found Chan-seok quite interesting and soon broke into a smile.